Hi, I'm Femi OK, and you're in the stream.
And I'm Malika Bilal, and all this week I'll be coming to you live from the Sundance Film Festival in the U.S. state of Utah. Today I'm joined by the director of the film Anote Tong, and former president of the island nation of Kiribati, Anote Tong. The film discusses the fight to stop the effects of climate change on the island nation of Kiribati and the mission, what that looks like.
So that's the stream coming to you live on Jazeera and on YouTube. And be sure to jump in and ask your questions in the comments section.
Kiribati is in the center of the world. It's right there, bang in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So far away, so isolated. We thought we would be immune from the tribulations of this world. The issue of climate change remains the most pressing challenge for us in Kiribati.
Rising sea levels have already taken a village on one of your islands. Do you see the possibility of all the people from Kiribati one day having to leave?
For those of us on the front line, it really does not matter what is agreed to in Paris, because we will continue to go underwater.
What you just saw was a clip from Anote's Arc, a new documentary exploring the real-world effects of climate change, specifically on the small nation of Kiribati. Check out this video, produced in December 2014 by our colleagues at AJ Plush. It explains how rising sea levels have affected the livelihoods of the island's 100,000 residents.
It's an island nation halfway between Australia and Hawaii, roughly the size of the United States, but only 2% of it is land. And that land is just 3 meters above sea level. Some of Kiribati's islands are already underwater, and half of its population has fled to the tiny capital of South Tarawa, which now has one of the highest population densities in the world. The government has begun a program to train citizens in skills, like nursing or mechanics, that would make them attractive migrants to other countries. And it's even bought a large chunk of land in neighboring Fiji, which says it's willing to host Kiribati's population. So will the rest of the world start paying attention before the people of Kiribati become the first wave of refugees fleeing from the rising sea?
Also joining us in the studio, Alice Thomas. She is the Climate Displacement Program Manager at the Washington, D.C.-based advocacy group Refugees International. Malika.
Thanks, Femi, and I'm with you. Of course, we are at the Kickstarter Lodge right now. A little cold, but we're braving it for this important topic. And a Kickstarter lounge because this was partially Kickstarter funded. I know the world premiere was on Friday. Tell our audience what it was that inspired you to make this film in the first place.
In the first place, I came to Kiribati in 2014, and I was amazed by what's happening there. I mean, they're losing their entire land, and I start questioning myself about the relationship between people and land, and what's going to happen for people when they lose everything. So then I wanted to make a movie that is character driven. I wanted to follow characters that just touch our hearts in the story, and not make another climate change movie with like scientific just giving us numbers.
Right.
And so it's why I started shadowing President Tong for like 3 years everywhere he's going around the world. And also Samari, which is a mother of 6 that moved to New Zealand because her whole homeland was basically destroyed by the
So talking about characters that touch our heart, Femi, of course you know this well. President Tong, you are a former guest of the stream. You were last on the show in 2015. You touched our audience's heart as well. I know that. But why was it important for you to be a part of this film?
Oh, let me be quite frank. I had when Matthew came to see me and told me that he wanted to make a film, I said, just go ahead. Beyond that, I really was not aware that the shots were being taken. A lot of the shots in the film I know nothing about.
Oh.
And so my entire focus was doing the job that I was doing. And seeing it on film for the first time really is new to me. Mm-hmm. So it's not something that I'm acting out. It's I'm actually doing, working, and sometimes Matthew would be in my face when I'm talking to people, and I'd push him out. And so to me, that film is, I'm just a subject, but I really was not acting in any part at any time.
Femi?
I want to show you this picture here. It's a production photograph that Matthew's team took. And there's so much blue in Kiribati. It's really hard to tell where the sea ends and where the sky begins. But this is, I'm not even exaggerating here, an apocalyptic story. Matthew, how did you convey that? This is potentially the end of the world for the people who live in Kiribati. They can see it coming. How did you do that?
So, you know, I really focus on the photography. I think the islands themselves as one character. I mean, I really try to bring the island and to bring the changes in climate that's happening there by going for the most stunning photography I can, just really to portray that and building a very strong soundscape also to just having a sense of what's happening there. But truly, it's an amazing experience to reach Kiribati, because you have those atolls. It's basically thin line, you know, just separating the world in two in the middle of the Pacific. It's just a very, very special place, and they're gonna lose that place. So for me, it was a very challenge how to basically show the place they're gonna lose. And the issue we have also in Kiribati, maybe we don't have in other climate change movies, like it's very subtle. Like the water is rising, but slowly. So I didn't want to make, and I couldn't make like those dramatic kind of climate change movie where you see like storm and drought and everything seems like very, very dramatic. So it's a subtle movie, but it's coming very slowly.
I wanted to bring up a couple of tweets, Femi, before we get too much further into the conversation, because I think these are really apt for right now. We got one from Paul. I want to share this with our audience here. Paul says, "Where is Kiribati?" And he mentions, I might seem ignorant, but he's not the only one who asked that question. So with that in mind, we got this tweet from Beck. This is what Beck said: "More awareness should be raised, in my opinion. Most people don't know that Kiribati even exists, let alone that it's slowly being swallowed by global warming." So two questions there. Former President Tong, are those questions that you are used to by now? And how do you answer them? How do you deal with them?
Well, it's not a new question, and I keep coming through. Every time I come through the immigration in different countries, they take my passport, turn it over and over. Where is this place? So it's not new. The film will certainly answer that question a little. But in terms of the challenge that we are facing, I mean, the initial focus on the climate change challenge was on the polar bears. Nobody knew or cared about people in our part of the world being affected by what was happening.
Polar bears.
And so I had to make that statement at the United Nations General Assembly. They say, yes, the polar bears are affected, so we. And so, yes, indeed, I think part of the campaign and the advocacy that I've been doing for more than 10 years, getting on to 14 years now, has been trying to tell the world what is happening. And I'm glad to say that to some extent, I think I have contributed to getting that message across. And but we still now are not getting the kind of action that's needed in order to address the challenge. So we still, that question remains a question.
Alice?
Yeah, I think it's so valuable to really focus in on, you know, what's happening in specific places like Kiribati, and to bring in the cultural aspect of, you know, it's not just the loss of, you know, a landmass or an island. It's a people's, it's a culture, because that personalizes it in a way that sometimes is really difficult to do, because people will see numbers. They'll see, you know, millions of people living on the coast of Bangladesh who will be affected, and they only see the numbers, and they don't see, you know, who the people are, who the individuals are. So films like this bring a really important message to the public, who, you know, their eyes glaze over when they read the paper and they look at, you know, 4 million people displaced by, you know, this event or that event. So it's really valuable what you're going to do with the film and take it around and show the culture and the unique culture, what we're losing that's been around for thousands of years. I mean, that's the other part too that is just so tragic. You can't just pick people up and move them somewhere else. I mean, you know, as the president knows and can tell us, I mean, people are their land. And that story is just so important to bring to the broader public.
I'm just wondering what options there are, Alice and Mr. President, and one of the options that comes up in the film is international community, we cannot do this by ourselves. You went to the UN in Geneva, and this is what you told them. Have a look.
So the next step is the global community willing to come forward? Is this council willing to make a contribution towards getting some real action on the ground so that we can give some sense of comfort, some sense of security to our people? Who do we appeal to and turn to for our people's right to survive in the challenge of climate change? And so let me pose that question again, because I don't believe there is any authority who can answer that question for us today. And we need that authority. What is the future for us?
Mr. President, do you have an answer to that question yet? Who do you appeal to?
No, it's been a question that's been tossed around. I mean, we've had the Paris Agreement, but I think we've all accepted responsibility, but nobody has accepted liability and responsibility for doing what needs to be done next. And I think this is what remains the question. Until we can address that, for us, the Paris Agreement will not mean a great deal, because regardless of what levels of emission we cut, even to zero, our future is still very much in jeopardy. So that question remains one to be answered still.
And Femi, when we talk about help from the international community and what others can do, of course, one of the other topics that came up, or really themes that came up in this film, was migrating with dignity, Mathieu. 75 people, as of the film, received visas to go to New Zealand. And you chronicled the life and times of one of those people, a woman. Tell us about how you found her story and what struck you about her story.
So I heard about that program back in Kiribati, and so I asked the New Zealand embassy to help me to find basically the names of the people. So I found this incredible character, Samari, that I've been picked by that program. So we had the incredible chance to really portray over a period of 4 years her life in Kiribati and a new life in New Zealand. And the new life in New Zealand is absolutely different. I mean, what they have as a life back home is basically they don't have to care about money, they don't have to care about rent, they don't have to care about even like the earth system is free. So it's all of a sudden they're confronting themselves to totally a new world, and I really think that's really come across the movie, and I'm so glad we can really capture that woman during that time, because it's really give a real example of what it is to migrate and bring and make the Anote Tong President message much stronger, because everyone can rely on that specific story.
Alice, it resonated with you when Mr. President said migrating with dignity.
That's exactly right. I mean, this is part of a broader debate we're having right now globally about migration and about refugees. And it's incredibly important, again, to have a film like this that describes what that's like, because there is, unfortunately, a anti-migration, anti-refugee rhetoric. And again, we forget these are individuals, these are humans, these are people. And what is the experience, and how do they need to be protected and assisted? It's, as you may know, the people who are forcibly displaced because of climate change do not fall within protection of the refugee framework. So if they arrive on another, leave their country and arrive in another country, they can't seek asylum. They have no right under the Refugee Convention. So the New Zealand courts have addressed this issue. They've been somewhat sympathetic to it, and now we have New Zealand coming forward with this arrangement to do this, which is incredibly important. And my question back to you, Mr. President, is whether you think this new initiative by New Zealand is going to be a way forward. I mean, by seeing countries finally stepping up and doing something, do you think this will perhaps encourage other countries to follow suit?
Well, I think it's really the kind of response that I've been challenging the international community to come up. I'm not about to go to visit a country and say, can you accept our people? But the message that I've been sending out has been to the entire international community. And the only response up to now has been from Fiji. When after buying land in Fiji, I think maybe the Fijians had no choice but to begin to think that they have to accept us. But the message coming forward from Fiji was very, very loud and clear. Yeah. And the message is, if and when Kiribati and Tuvalu, the people of Kiribati and Tuvalu, have nowhere else to go as a result, as a consequence of the impacts of climate change, then Fiji is willing to accept it. What New Zealand is coming forward with, and I think this is the kind of inevitable response that has to come forward, given the situation we are finding ourselves in. The biggest mistake we made, and I think it's already been made, is to deny what is inevitable and not do anything about it.
Yeah.
So the policy that I've been advocating, migration with dignity, is actually being proactive rather than waiting for things to happen. And then now people will indeed become climate refugees because they're not prepared, they're not ready. And so it's about using a little bit of common sense to see what's going on and to try to avoid repeating that. I know there is a lot of denial that we don't want to migrate, but I think that is the choice for the individual to make. But as a government, as leaders, we have the responsibility to empower them to be able to do it, to be able to make that choice. If they choose to stay behind, that is their choice. Yeah. But if they have to stay behind because they don't have the capacity, because of language, resources, then we should accept responsibility.
And Alice, I'm so glad that you brought that up because you're actually thinking along the same wavelength of our community. I want to bring up a tweet we got a little bit earlier from H.G. Flores. And of course, this is directed to you, former President Tong. They want to know, does the former president believe the Kiribati people should seek refuge together, or will the citizens be free to seek refuge in different countries? What effect will that have on the future of Kiribati culture?
Or if I was in responsible, if I was in leadership, if you can give me a whole island to myself, I'll be very happy. But of course, that's not practical. It's wonderful to keep our people together so that at least we maintain that the question that's being raised, we can retain our culture, our tradition, our identity. But of course, that's not practical. And as far as possible, it'd be wonderful to keep our people together. We've had the experience of our people going to different countries, and it's not entirely new for us. And so we had some experience. And it's if it can be done, if there is a program to ensure that we have a country of our own, thank you. You're rising to the challenge of international.
Mr. President, Alice mentioned earlier that when you move, it's not just you relocating. There's a deep, deep connection to the land, especially in Kiribati. There's a moment that Matthew caught where you're fishing, but you tell us so much more than you just fishing. Have a look.
Islands will be gone. And so if we cannot build resilience, we cannot build the islands or find somewhere else to live, we have to go somewhere else. Whether this is a good thing or not, but the reality will be, if we leave Kiribati, then our ability to retain our culture as being distinct, our tradition as being distinct, will no longer be very easy.
I want to share with you an idea, Mr. President, from one of our online community. They're eager to help you solve this issue. So Black Physicist says levees and pumps like New Orleans, maybe they could be a solution for helping you out, making sure that the water doesn't come across, so it's so high that you have to move. But in general, the sea is not to be trifled with. Is there a technological solution, perhaps, to this rising ocean?
Well, that's precisely the question that I've been asking around. I've been talking to Engineers Without Borders. I've been talking to the United Arab Emirates who build those islands, and including the engineers who build the islands themselves, the Dutch engineers. I've spoken to the Koreans. I've spoken to the New Zealanders. I will speak to anybody who thinks has an idea how we may be able to continue to live on our islands. It'd be wonderful to be able to do that. And if anybody does have an answer, but of course, we are talking about the technology, and there's no question in my mind that it can be done. After all, we've got Richard Branson talking about building a hotel in space. Surely we can build islands. The question that is going to be the challenge is who would be willing to come forward with the resources?
And of course, the money, which is why there was a portion in your film where you are you're taking footage of them discussing plans of a floating island. Absolutely, and then yes. the cost comes up, yeah. And someone says, well, you know, that's what it will take to build it, but who is going to foot that cost? How did you even get into that room, and what was that like hearing that answer as a filmmaker?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a solution that was proposed by Shimizu Corporation in Japan, and they're one of the most powerful and bigger engineering company in the planet. So it's doable. We can do those. We can build those islands. And the question is, first, of course, the tax price is extremely high, and who's going to pay for that? But the second question is like, what can you bring to those artificial islands? And that's what I want to portray in that movie also. Like Kiribati people have a strong connection to the land, to the spirits. So once you're building those islands, they can live on it, but what can they keep with them? You know, like what can remain from Kiribati culture and Kiribati spirituality? When the day they're gonna just live in very, very high-tech high-rise. But you know, like technology may be an answer, but it's not. I don't think it's an answer to save Kiribati culture.
Alice.
Yeah, I think it's it brings up one of the challenges for this whole issue is the need to plan both at the same time for migration with dignity and to ensure that there are legal pathways and that people themselves have a right to self-determination and their human rights are protected, but not taking away from the fact that there are mitigation efforts we can be doing to prevent climate change, and there's also adaptation and resilience building that needs to be done. And there's been a divide sometimes in the community about too much concern about, stopping climate change is taking away from the need to start to adapt and prepare for it. Or, I remember going to an islands conference back in 2010 and someone from the Solomon Islands saying, how dare you talk to me about being a climate refugee? I don't accept that. You need to step up and you need to prevent this from happening, and you need to provide the funds to help us to adapt. So these are two parallel tracks that, as President Tong well knows, you have to balance both messaging. We have to do both. It's not we need to do everything we can right now to be preventing the worst effects of climate change from happening, and we can't let go of that. But at the same time, we need to plan for it. As President Tong says, we need migration arrangements, we need technological advances, and we really need the developed countries to commit to giving resources to help the least, the most vulnerable adapt.
I wanted to bring this tweet in, Fenmi, because there are a lot of people who are on the same page about this issue in our community, and then there's some who are a little bit skeptical, maybe even cynical. This is a tweet we got from Liam, and he raises an interesting point. He says, the new documentary reinforces the growing discourse of Kiribati as drowning or sinking, whilst emotive, he goes on to say in another tweet, drowning and sinking discourses close down debate, and they make the ultimate outcome seem inevitable. Mathieu, President Tong, what do you make of that criticism?
I think it's a very fair comment, but I
Yeah.
think the question is, if we don't do anything, then certainly the islands will be submerged. The projections of the IPCC are very clear. But the question is, are we going to allow it to happen? I think our first option would be no. We would appeal, and maybe appeal to the conscience and the morality of people around the planet that, let's give us a chance. We need to be given the chance to rebuild our resilience so that we can survive this challenge. And so, it's not about giving up, but it's about highlighting the challenge that is. I think I'm very conscious of the interpretation by some people. They say, if there's nothing can be done, okay, let's not bother. No, it's actually the other way around. All of what I've been trying to do is to galvanize our thinking that if that is the thought, then let's forget about it. Let's think positive. Let's see what can be done. It's going to be a different world. I can see that. But nevertheless, it's still a sovereignty. Our sovereignty will be retained. The huge fishery resource that we have can be maintained, and maybe can contribute to the building of our resilience. Maybe we can afford it.
All right, that's a positive, hopeful note to end on, President Tong. Matthew and Alice, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It is not done yet, we're going online. But let me just show you a tweet we've just had in during this show from Cameron Kang. He says, the climate refugee crisis will not end with Kiribati, it's the start. And many more countries will see their own citizens becoming refugees, including the USA. Now, you can follow our coverage using #stream at Sundance and, of course, #AJStream. See you next time. Thanks for watching, everybody.